This question is on allowance for impairment of trade receivables. It's very important you know its nature. This one is credit plus credit nature, which means debit minus. Read the question carefully. Delia's business has its year end on 31st May. This represents the end of the financial period which you will be using doing the impairment loss on trade receivable only on this date at the end of the year. Okay. So since you have 900 in your allowance, you can draw a timeline where you have the start, where your allowance starts from $900. Okay, you can skip the bankruptcy. Just bear in mind in your head that there's a bankruptcy that you need to adjust for later on, and go straight to the end. All right, find out what is the ending of the story. The ending is that at the end of the year, you have 10,500 in your trade receivable, and you want your allowance to be maintained at 5%. So you take 5% times 10,500 to give you 525. Okay, and this on first glance it looks like your allowance is going to decrease from 900 to 525, and this represent a decrease of 375. So a decrease in allowance, you will debit your allowance, right? Okay, so just bear in mind that just now when we were reading the question, perhaps you can start this point and remember that there's a bankruptcy that took place and the amount that is to be written off is 400. Okay, so always remember that when we write off someone, we will debit the allowance account. Okay, because by debiting allowance, remember, it will decrease your allowance. You can see here that at the start we say that debit allowance will decrease it. So when someone goes bankrupt, we are going to reduce our allowance account, and at the same time we are going to remove the trade receivable from our accounts. Okay, so because he cannot pay us back, so might as well just write him off. Okay, so this is a double entry, and this will be your answer for part A. You will debit 400 to your allowance for impairment of trade receivable and credit trade receivable fang. Okay, so what does it mean here? Does our timeline change anything? So here you can draw a middle point, a midpoint, whereby Fang goes bankrupt and you're going to minus 400 from the allowance account at the start of the year. So now you are left with $500. So from 500, now you analyze, okay, this $500 represents a increase of $25. So from 500 to 525, you require to plus 25. So to increase your impairment loss on to increase your allowance, you need to credit your allowance. From the start we identify credit plus is allowance, and then we will debit impairment loss on trade receivable, and the amount will be $25. Okay, so the timeline will be very useful here.